Hey guys, welcome to Man Medicine, where we talk about how men can optimize their health and escape the collapsing U.S. healthcare system. Well, I wasn't going to do this again, but I'm going to do another reaction video for you guys. This is what I get for trolling YouTube. The longer I go and the more medical and nutritional and training videos I look at, the more silliness that I come across. And of course, there's also like good information out there too. But this is it's a very short video by a registered dietitian about ketogenic diets. And essentially she spends the length of this video disparaging ketogenic diets and perpetuating a number of myths that are provably false. And also sort of twisting some truths about ketogenic diets to show them in the most unfavorable light possible. I'm doing this for you guys mainly because I just want to show you guys that when you get online and you look for good information out there, it is there, but it is buried under heaps and heaps of bullshit sometimes. And that bullshit can also come from, not just like gym bros and the uneducated lay public, but also from people with real credentials, like this individual. This is a very intelligent woman. She's very well trained. And like I mentioned in my other reaction videos, this is not meant to be an ad hominem attack. I don't do that on this channel. It's not professional. I have a lot of respect for her training and her degree. I just happen to disagree with some of the things that she says. I bring this up just to show you guys and to drive home the point. And I'll apply this to myself. Just because I'm a physician and this person's a dietitian, I don't know if she has a master's degree, a PhD, whatever. We're still human beings and we're still fallible. And there's a very strong human tendency, and I'm guilty of this as well, is to cherry pick data. And you cherry pick data to support the things that you already believe. And you often either completely ignore or downplay or disparage data that contradicts your previously or currently held beliefs. That's a natural human tendency. And just because you have a bunch of letters after your name and been to college for 25 years, it doesn't make you immune to that. So I did a little bit of research about this individual, and I wasn't actually terribly surprised to find that she belongs to a vegan animal rights activist organization that also promotes vegan and plant-based diets for health, but has a very strong animal rights bent to it. So she has a moral and philosophical objection to the consumption of animal products. And so it's not surprising that she would cherry pick data from the nutritional world where she has her degree and focus on the data that that essentially shows that you shouldn't eat animal products, and she overemphasizes the data that that shows that you should be eating plants instead. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So anyway, this video is a pretty good example of that. Now, at this point in the game, like I don't have a dog in this fight per se. If you want to be a vegan, I don't care. You go be a vegan. You can be very healthy as a vegan. I think to be a vegan, though, to be a healthy vegan, you have to be kind of nutritionally sophisticated. It's a little harder as a vegan. It's certainly not impossible, but you just have to be a little bit more knowledgeable, which, there's no problem with that. I personally, I like ketogenic diets for me personally. I'm fully aware of the pros and cons of ketogenic diets, and I'll talk a little bit about that in here. But for me, I use ketogenic specifically when I'm trying to cut weight. And specifically cut body fat. And the reason I like ketogenic diets in that setting for me is if there's one thing that's going to sabotage a diet for me, and I think a lot of you might be able to relate to this, is hunger. So when I follow a ketogenic diet, and at the end I'm going to show you how I do a ketogenic diet to make it, I think, as healthy as possible, but I'm just not as hungry as I am when I have the same amount of calories using like a lower fat type of a meal plan. So in the middle of a 10-hour ER shift where I don't get to eat that often, I don't need to be I don't need my stomach growling, and I don't need the distraction of being hungry all the time. When I'm on a ketogenic diet, that hunger sensation, those food cravings they're much better for me. Now that might not be the case for you, but for me it works great, and so I like ketogenic diets. I will fully admit that I used to be a bit of a keto zealot. I thought that this was the best way for everybody to eat, but over the last 20 years, I mean, the data is, I think, pretty clear that there's nothing magical about ketogenic diets, just like there's nothing magical about vegan diets. There's pros and cons to both of them. So again, I don't have a dog in this fight. I'm just pointing this out to you guys as this is just education, just to show you that, there are always two sides, sometimes more than that to some of these complex issues. Human nutrition is an extraordinarily complex thing. Studying it is very difficult for a lot of reasons I'm not going to get into. And so, the quality of the data that different, dietary advocates like to throw out to you varies widely. Some of it's great data, some of it's complete garbage. And, unless you're really trained to read medical studies, it's kind of hard to tell what's good and what's bad. So, it's hard for the lay public because there's, the information is out there. The problem is there's like information overload, and it's challenging. So, anyway, with that in mind, I'll just say one final thing. When somebody tells me that they're keto, it doesn't really tell me a whole hell of a lot about their diet, other than that they restrict carbohydrates, presumably to the level that they enter into dietary ketosis, or they become keto adapted. Although a lot of people think that they're eating keto, quote keto, and then if you check their serum ketones, they're not in ketosis. So, a keto diet could be something that's very healthy from whole food sources, have a lot of, green leafy vegetables and lots of micronutrients and phytochemicals and all the good things, that are good for your body. But it could also be complete processed garbage. You could just be living off of like Atkins chocolate bars and drinking bacon grease, and that's still a keto diet, but those are really like two vastly different diets. And the same thing goes for vegan diets. So when someone tells me they're a vegan, that doesn't tell me anything other than you don't eat animal products. For all I know, you could be eating a very healthy whole food vegan type of diet, or you could just be living off of like Captain Crunch and peanut butter. Again, those are two vastly different diets. The health outcomes are likely to be very different, but they're both, quote, vegan. So, these terms that people throw around, I think, they add to the confusion, because one keto diet can look very, very different and be much different for you in terms of your long-term health than another keto diet. Same thing goes for vegan. And I'm not even going to talk about paleo and all that stuff. That you can apply the same thing. So, okay, we're getting there. So this is the organization that this dietitian belongs to. It's called the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Just within the name, it sort of implies that, like, if you don't agree with their philosophy, then you're not practicing responsible medicine. So, I guess I'm an irresponsible doctor. But here you can see, they have a lot of stuff on nutrition. You guys can check it out if you want to. But the first thing, boom, on their page, tell OHSU, stop killing animals to train surgeons. I'm not going to wade into that right now. I can just say that there are a lot of people that I took care of in the military with severe combat trauma that are alive today because I had live tissue training as a student and resident. So this is, maybe that's another video for another time, but they're adamantly against any sort of animal research at all. So, okay, with that in mind, that's enough of me talking. Let's roll into this video here. So here's the first part. Like I said, I'm going to stop it periodically.
Hey, I'm Lee Crosby, a dietitian with Physicians Committee. Now, if you stay up to date on celebrity gossip, you have no doubt heard about the latest weight loss fad, the ketogenic diet.
Okay, I do not stay up with celebrity diets, but or fads of any kind. I despise most celebrities. However, so here she's trying to insinuate that ketogenic diets are just some new Hollywood fad. Okay, that's not true. So ketogenic diets have been around for a very, 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 very long time. There's mention here we have this paper, History of the Ketogenic Diet, mentions as early as 500 BC the use of fasting to induce dietary ketosis. Of course, they didn't know that at the time for the treatment of epilepsy. In terms of weight loss, one of the earliest examples of a low high-fat ketogenic diet is the so-called Banting diet. William Banting was at the time a morbidly obese. He was an undertaker, actually. I think he was in England, and he lived in the 1800s and struggled with his weight his entire life. And I looked to see how big was this guy. And he was considered morbidly obese at the time. So he was about 5'5", 5'6", and weighed just over 200 pounds. So, I see 25 of him a day in the emergency department. He's not that big by today's standards. But regardless, he was treated with a low carbohydrate diet back in the 1800s, and I think it was over the course of about a year. I think he lost either 48 or 58 pounds. Was very happy and was actually able to keep it off. And so he published. This is one of the first written works on low carbohydrate diets. It's called A Letter on Corpulence by William Banting, and you can still get this today. It's very popular. He made a lot of money from it, and incidentally donated it all to charity, which I thought was pretty cool. So, okay, let's keep going here. So this is not a fad diet. She's trying to imply that it's this shady fad diet. Ketogenic diets have been around for a very, 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 very long time. Okay.
So, what exactly is a ketogenic or a keto diet? It's a diet that severely restricts carbohydrate intake. That causes the body to shift from burning glucose, its preferred fuel, to burning mostly fat, a state called ketosis. The shift away from our body's favorite fuel can actually be why keto diets can help in one rare instance, and that's for drug-resistant seizures.
Okay, I love how she says they can help in one rare instance, as if they couldn't possibly help with anything else. But she's absolutely right about epilepsy control. This is a fascinating thing. Maybe I'll talk about this at another talk. But for refractory epilepsy, even to this day, especially in pediatric populations, ketogenic diets are sometimes prescribed to control seizures.
On a keto diet, the brain is actually starved of its main fuel and literally becomes less active. Now, that's not what most of us are going for.
It's not what most of us are going for. Okay. So she's basically saying your brain is going to slow down when you're on a ketogenic diet. Okay, I don't know what that means, your brain is going to slow down. But she's implying that you're going to have some sort of cognitive deficit, fuzzy thinking, all that kind of stuff. Well, what does the research say about that? Let's find out. So here we go. This is the International Journal of Molecular Sciences. Effects of ketone bodies on brain metabolism and function in neurodegenerative diseases. So this is a really great review on the use of ketogenic diets in treating not just patients with Alzheimer's, but also Parkinson's, other forms of dementia, and other neurodegenerative diseases. But they also review the effects of ketogenic diets on cognitive processes in people who are at risk for those but don't have those. So, people who are obese, type 2 diabetes, all that kind of stuff. So what does this paper have to say? So it says here, let me bring this up here. Ketone bodies together with lactate are the main alternative fuels for the brain, and both are able to cross the blood-brain barrier through monocarboxylate transporters, MCTs, in the endothelial cells. Okay, I don't think she would disagree with that. She seems to think that you are starving your brain. That's probably not the term that I would use. If you take away glucose, you're not starving your brain when you have an alternative, source of fuel. Okay, starving is when you have no alternative source of fuel, and the brain runs quite well on ketones. Okay, what about cognitive function? Okay, here we go. This is a summary here. Okay. Individuals without cognitive disease. In persons without known cognitive disease but suffering from type 2 diabetes, which, as I mentioned, this is a risk factor for cognitive impairment. So they did a study where they did an IV infusion of BHB, beta hydroxybutyrate, okay, which is a ketone. It's present in high levels during dietary ketosis. It says it significantly improved working memory performance when compared to a placebo infusion. However, no change in global cognitive score. So in terms of working memory, an IV infusion of ketones, actually, it did have some effect. And this is interesting. Now, further, in elderly persons without dementia, a single ketogenic meal of medium chain fatty acids, so they don't have to necessarily be in like full-blown ketosis or keto adaptive, but just a single ketogenic meal improved performance in several cognitive domains, with improvements correlating to level of circulating BHB. Meaning, the higher the levels of beta hydroxybutyrate, the more improvement they saw in these cognitive measures that they were looking at. Consistently, cognitive benefits have been reported in elderly nursing home residents with prolonged treatment duration of MCFA, medium chain fatty acid supplementation. These studies together suggest that individuals without cognitive disease may benefit from a ketogenic intervention. Okay. But somehow that's not what we're looking for, I guess, according to her. So, all right, let's continue.
For much of human history, actually, the keto diet, the only one there was famine. Without enough to eat, the body was forced to burn its stored fat. However, to trick the body into a state of ketosis today, keto dieters slash carbohydrates and drastically increase their fat intake, in some cases eating up to 90% of their calories from fat. To achieve this, keto diets tend to focus on the fattiest possible meats, things like bacon, ribeye steaks, and salmon, butter, oils, and some non-starchy vegetables.
Okay. I just want to look at the face that she makes when she talks about these kind of foods. Like, she's just this like, disgusting, maybe if you're a vegan, that does sound disgusting to you. Bacon, oily fish, butter, and leafy vegetables sounds absolutely delicious to me. But look at this face, and I will tell you, like, as a medical, lecturer, when I if I want to listen to a scientific talk and I want somebody to present data to me, I don't want this is not the face that I want to see, I'm not trying to be, cruel or unprofessional here, but like, she's having an emotional response to the thought of people eating oily fish and bacon and, and certain kinds of vegetables. It's just this like pained look on her face when it happens. Just present me the data and spare me the facial expressions and the, the insinuations. I'll make up my own mind on this stuff. Thanks. Okay, let's keep going.
Most forms of the diet limit carbs to just 20 to 30 grams per day or even less. In real-world terms, that's the equivalent of just half a cup of brown rice or 1 cup of blueberries for the entire day.
Okay, so that is correct. I mean, that is, 20 to 30 grams a day is about what most ketogenic diets advocate. That's about, when you go above that, you tend to start getting out of ketosis per se. And 20 to 30 grams. So it depends on your carbohydrate source, right? Yeah, white rice, you're not going to be able to eat a whole hell of a lot of white rice, or blueberries, right? There's a ton of sugar in the blueberries, and a lot of, high glycemic, starchy carbohydrates that are immediately turned into blood sugar in white rice. But you know what? This is also right here. This is what 30 grams of carbohydrate can look like. Like, look at all that. Look at all those fruits, vegetables, nuts. You have some strawberries thrown in there. So, or you could have one hamburger bun. So, yeah, depending on what carbohydrate source you have, 30 grams can either be something this big, or it could be something this big that you need to split up over multiple meals because it's literally so much food bulk. Okay, so she's been misleading there. It just depends on what your carbohydrate source is.
Now, here's why that's bad news for our health. By limiting intake of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and beans, your body misses out on the vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, and fiber it needs to function.
Okay, this is where she's wrong. This is where she's wrong, guys. So she says the body misses out on vitamins, minerals, fiber, phytosterols it needs to function. Okay, without taking a deep dive into fiber, fiber is not an essential nutrient. You do not need fiber. There is no deficiency state that occurs when you don't have dietary fiber, or what she would consider insufficient amounts of dietary fiber. Is there a potential link to colon cancer, all that stuff? Yes, people debate that data. I'm not going to get into it right now. Fiber, but bottom line, fiber is not an essential food group. And, the fact that you have less fiber on a ketogenic diet, which again is not even necessarily true, you can supplement with additional fiber if needed, is not an issue. Okay, are we missing out on phytosterols? Okay, so first of all, what are phytosterols? Okay, so these are plant compounds that are like similar to cholesterol. They do not get absorbed in your gut very well, but they do tend to impede the absorption of cholesterol from your diet. So phytosterols, they can be a useful adjunct in people with elevated lipid levels, and they could potentially be beneficial, from a heart health standpoint, just because they will modulate your lipids if you have a large amount of them. So she's saying that if you follow a ketogenic diet, you're going to miss out on phytosterols. Well, let's take a little closer look at that. Okay, so this is from like one of the USDA websites. So these are some of the top foods that have very high phytosterol contents on them, and you tell me whether you think these are high carb or low carb foods. So the highest one here, in terms for a single, so half a cup of mature raw soybeans. Half a cup of that has 149 milligrams of phytosterols. Okay, you could put that in a ketogenic diet. Okay, mature raw peas, absolutely. I love peas. This is another low glycemic item that you can very easily put into a ketogenic diet. And I'll run through the list here. I highlight, so all the ones in red are either low or zero carbohydrate food sources, and you can see all of them have like relatively high numbers of or high phytosterol counts. So we can go all the way down here: sesame oil, kidney beans, pistachio nuts, safflower oil, lentils, cashew nuts, cottonseed oil, macadamia nuts. I love macadamia nuts. Almonds. I love almonds. Olive oil. I cooked the shit out of olive oil. I put olive oil on everything. And Brussels sprouts raw. Like, okay, so Brussels sprouts stink and I think are disgusting, but hey, you might like them. You can totally include those on a ketogenic diet. I shudder to think like what 30 grams of carbohydrate, how many Brussels sprouts that is. It's enough to like probably stink up my entire house. So I'm not going to go there, but if you want to, you can. Okay. So she's completely wrong about that. Like it's just not correct. She's not telling you guys the whole story. So she's saying, she's implying that ketogenic diets are deficient in a wide range of vitamins and minerals and other nutrients, and then is sort of implying that, her approach, which is a vegan, or certainly at the very least just a plant-based diet, is not. It's completely false, okay? And here's a paper that shows. This is actually a great paper. I came across this a number of years ago, and I kind of filed it away on my hard drive because I knew a time would come when I would get to use it. And here it is. Nutrition in Clinical Practice. All right, this is a good one. 2010. Nutrition concerns and health effects of vegetarian diets. So real briefly in this one, they say the main nutrients of concern that vegan diets are almost universally deficient in is, not surprisingly, B12. Okay, you do have to supplement with B12. I know some vegans that tell me there's some good vegan sources of vitamin B12, but generally, like, you probably need to supplement with B12 if you're on a very strict vegan diet. Vitamin D tends to be deficient. Of course, all of us, no matter what our diet is, tend to be a bit deficient in vitamin D. So, I'm not going to hammer too hard on that. But they don't eat a lot of dairy or fortified products sometimes, so they might miss out on like extra dietary vitamin D, and then omega-3 fatty acids, calcium, iron, and zinc. Okay, this study is the one I like even more. So, prevalence of micronutrient deficiencies in popular diet plans. This is a research article from Journal of International Society of Sports Nutrition, 2010. So another good one that I've had on my hard drive for a very, very long time. So what they did is they compared some of the more popular diets that are out there. The South Beach diet, which I think most people have heard of, is kind of moderate fat, moderate protein, moderate, low glycemic carb diet. It's not ketogenic. An Atkins diet, which is obviously higher in fat, much lower in carbohydrate. The DASH diet, which is a largely plant-based, very low saturated fat, low sodium diet, also quite popular. Best Life diet, I had to look that one up. I didn't know what that was, but that's just sort of it's a well-balanced diet. It's the one that like some guy that was on Oprah's show really likes it. It's sort of a common sense diet. It's low in saturated fat, but it does allow you to have, a fair amount of poly and monounsaturated fats. You can have things like chicken, lean fish, that kind of stuff. So it's not a vegan diet. When they looked at these diets, so let's look at this top graph here. The average person on these diets, this is the total number of calories that the average person would eat. So let's, the closest one to a vegan diet is the DASH diet. So average person on a DASH diet consumes a little over 2,200 calories, and we'll compare it to the Atkins diet, which is the closest to a ketogenic diet. Average person there consumes let's just say 1,800 calories. We'll round up. And by the way, that's probably why ketogenic diets, some of the studies show that they have better fat loss or weight loss than conventional diets. Is because, again, you're not hungry, so you eat less calories. So it's not anything magic about ketogenic diets. But, they looked at the, how sufficient these diets were in a cross-section of like 27 different essential micronutrients. So the DASH diet was up there with the Best Life diet at around just like a little over 50% sufficient. So it barely gave you half of what you needed in a typical day for these 27 nutrients. The Atkins diet was worse at 44. South Beach was worse at 22. And then they figured out, okay, if we were going to get you to 100% of all of these like 27 micronutrients that are so important, how many calories from each diet would you have to eat in a single day to get all the nutrients that you need without using supplements? Okay. So get ready for this one. So the DASH diet, you're going to have to eat 33,500 calories a day, all right, to get that. Now, you want to do the Atkins diet, tie on the feed bag here, 37,500, and you can look at the other ones there. So you have to eat like huge amounts. So the point of this is like, yeah, you can say ketogenic diets are deficient in, various micronutrients, and that's true. But that doesn't mean that any other diet is that much better. They're all deficient in micronutrients to some extent or another. Some are better than others. Some may have more magnesium. Others might have more zinc. There's going to be variations. But the point is, none of them give you 100% of what you need in terms of in optimal levels. So again, she's misleading you here a little bit with this. It's she's cherry picking the data. So, okay, let's keep moving.
In the short term, this can cause problems like fatigue and constipation, literally making keto diets a no-go.
Okay. It's a no-go. Talk about constipation. Yeah, so some people do deal with constipation on a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet. That's a real thing. But here's what we need to really make sure we understand what constipation means, okay? So, if you go from having a bowel movement every single day on a regular diet, and then you go to a ketogenic diet and you have 3 bowel movements a week, whatever, I'm just picking those numbers. Is that constipation? Well, I don't know. Are you having abdominal pain, bloating, distension? Are you uncomfortable? Are you passing painful rock hard stools? Okay. Are you having to strain so much that you're giving yourself a hemorrhoid or a rectal fissure? Okay, that's constipation, all right? It's symptomatic, it's painful, you don't feel good. In my opinion, if you don't have any of that stuff, pooping 3 times a week is a plus versus having to poop every single day, So just make sure when you hear about this constipation issue that, you understand what exactly they're talking about. Pooping less doesn't mean constipation necessarily, okay? It's not, it's not necessarily a bad thing, all right? But let's look at what the data says. Okay, this is a study from the journal Nutrients, Association Between Dietary Factors and Constipation in Adults Living in Luxembourg. So, I guess we can only apply it to people that live in Luxembourg. But I'll cut to the chase here. This is the highlight of their conclusions. So they looked at different food groups and be like, okay, which of these are associated with constipation and which of them are not? So not surprisingly, like eating a lot of grains was associated with a lower risk of constipation, but so was eating a lot of fat, which is a bit surprising in this study. So as well as starch. So you would think that, the excess fat, as she implies, would lead to more constipation. And this is conversely, sugary products, sodium intake, and higher energy intake were correlated with higher constipation scores. Okay, so don't eat sugar if you want to avoid constipation. Surprisingly, this is interesting, surprisingly, some items which are well documented to impact constipation, such as fruit and vegetable intake, were not associated with constipation score in our analysis. So take it for what it's worth. That's probably not an accurate conclusion, but in this particular study, eating fruits and vegetables didn't seem to make a difference on rates of constipation in Luxembourg.
Long-term keto dieting could lead to dangerous nutrient deficiencies and increase the risk for having a heart attack and getting colon cancer.
Okay, these are two big ones. Let's talk about this. Okay, like the colon cancer one, we can talk about that. That's easy. The heart disease one, could literally be like a 1 or 2 hour talk because this is complex, it's nuanced, and I don't think anybody knows for sure what the answer is to this. But this is what some of the studies show. So it's very hard to, like, coronary artery disease develops over decades, right? So it's very hard to follow people for that long. They drop out of studies, and I would say it's impossible to keep a solid group of individuals on a ketogenic diet, for the decades it requires to like definitively answer this. But, what we can do is look at like, how do ketogenic diets in the short run, how do they affect the risk factors that we know are associated with coronary artery disease? Okay, so this is a study, Nutrition, Metabolism, and Cardiovascular Disease, 2014, the low carbohydrate diet and cardiovascular risk factors, evidence from epidemiological studies. So they, put together a lot of different studies, and they tried to draw some conclusions from that. Okay, and we'll talk about this a little bit. So here's the first one here. Despite widely held beliefs, with the exception of a few studies, most randomized controlled trials have shown low carbohydrate diets increase HDL, decrease total and LDL cholesterol. Moreover, studies consistently reported that the low carbohydrate diet reduced triglycerides and to a greater extent than the isocaloric low fat diet change. So that's one like big thing in your lipid panel that will change most dramatically on a ketogenic diet is your triglycerides, which are the most carbohydrate sensitive in the short run part of your lipid panel. Those will definitely plummet. Okay. Now, what they don't mention here, though, the biggest changes in your cholesterol panel here, whether it's on a ketogenic diet or on a low fat, vegan diet, a lot of that comes from weight loss and fat loss. So, keep that in mind. If the weight loss is the same, then, these ketogenic diets don't seem to have, they're not miracle cures for your lipids. And in many of these studies, they're comparable to a low fat diet. And they mention that here. It says, despite fears of more atherogenic lipid profiles on low carbohydrate diets as compared to low fat diets for weight loss, in general, the low carbohydrate diet itself improved lipid profiles, including total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, total over HDL ratio, and triglycerides. In fact, both low carbohydrate and low fat diets appeared to improve the lipid profiles without strong evidence that either one was better. There you go. So I want to talk just briefly, I don't have a paper for this one, but I'm just going to go off the cuff, about a particular phenomenon that the carnivore people like to talk about. So there's a subset of people that will follow a ketogenic diet, and they get crazy high LDL levels as a result of it. Even though, everything else, like they're losing weight, maybe their blood pressure's come down, other things, all seem to be tracking as they should, but they have these like massive LDL spikes. So they call these people lean mass hyper responders. They tend to be like lean, fit, CrossFit type people. When I go on a ketogenic diet, I track my lipids very closely, and everything gets better, just like we talked about in the other studies. It's not dramatic because they're already pretty good, but my LDL goes down, my HDL goes up a few points, my ApoB goes down. But there's a subset of people that have these crazy high LDL spikes. And the way that the carnivore people, approach this, they're like, oh no, this isn't anything you need to worry about, because, okay, yeah, you do have a lot of extra LDL, but it's not the small, dense, atherogenic LDL. It's the large, fluffy LDL, which really doesn't put you at risk for heart disease. Nobody knows for sure. Like, that hasn't been answered definitively, but I think that they're incorrect about that. Because it really is the total number of ApoB particles that is the most strongly associated with the development of plaque. Now, I understand that atherosclerosis. Believe me, I understand it's an inflammatory disease. There's a lot that goes into it, hypertension, genetics, and probably a whole bunch of other factors that we haven't even discovered yet. But, just because you have a lot of these large, fluffy, low density LDL particles, it doesn't mean, just because they're less atherogenic doesn't mean that they're non-atherogenic. And when you have a lot of them floating around, like, these LDL, these particle numbers, sometimes these people have is like many thousands, there is a gradient there. And so granted, maybe they don't embed in the arterial wall as rapidly as these small, dense particles do, but they still contribute to atherosclerosis. So anyway, I guess time will tell on that one, but if I started seeing those LDL spikes when I was on a ketogenic diet, I wouldn't do it. I think it's too risky. We'll see what happens, with these people as time goes on, and we'll have better data. But, total ApoB number is important, and you don't want that number shooting through the roof. Okay, even if you're even if you're one of these lean mass hyper responders. So. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the colon cancer thing. So this is a journal article here. This is from the Lancet. Carcinogenicity of consumption of red and processed meat. So there's a ton of studies now that seem to show relatively conclusively that processed red meats are associated with an increased risk of colon cancer. And then there's some that also show that perhaps unprocessed meats are also associated with an increased risk of colon cancer, but to a lesser extent. Now, this is controversial because, especially in the unprocessed meat category, because there are folks that say that a lot of this carcinogenic signal that we're seeing has a lot to do with the way these foods are cooked and prepared. So if they're charred under high heat. There are all of these, heterocyclic amines and all these other carcinogenic compounds that are created that are probably contributing to the colon cancer risk. There's probably something to that. So regardless, though, the numbers I think are important here. And so what they say in this article here, and this is you'll see this quoted fairly widely. It says a meta-analysis of colorectal cancer in 10 cohort studies reported a statistically significant dose-response relationship with a 17% increased risk per 100 grams per day of red meat and an 18% increased risk of 50 grams per day of processed meats. Okay, so sounds pretty scary, right? So what you need to understand when you hear this, well, first of all, most lay people, when they hear, oh, there's a 17% increased risk of colon cancer, they're like, oh, if I eat meat, there's a 17% chance I'm going to get colon cancer. And that's not what that means. So this is the difference between absolute risk and relative risk. So what you need to understand is like, okay, if you're an average person, assuming you don't have a family history or one of these weird polyposis syndromes, like, what is the chance of you getting colon cancer over the course of your life? Like, you live to be 85 years old. What's the chance that you're going to get colorectal cancer? And it varies from country to country. We'll just say it's probably somewhere around 5%. Okay. Now, if you were to consume meat on a regular basis, daily basis even, for the entirety of your life, what would be your risk of developing colon cancer at that point? Well, it goes up to probably 6-ish%. Okay, so it's about a 1% overall absolute risk of getting colon cancer. So I'll let you decide whether you think the risk is worth it. So again, there's a lot that goes into your getting colon cancer. Do you smoke? Are you overweight? Do you have a family history? There's a lot that goes into getting colon cancer other than just like eating red meat. So it'd be a little bit challenging to kind of tease that out. But the point is, yeah. So is she wrong about the increased risk of colon cancer if you eat a lot of red meat, whether it's processed or unprocessed on a ketogenic diet? Yeah. Is she perhaps deliberately not telling you the difference between absolute and relative risk? Possibly. I don't know. But I think it's important that you understand that. And then, this blanket statement that you're going to develop heart disease if you try a ketogenic diet is just not supported by the literature. It's a complex issue. I know that there's people on both sides of this, but this is a scare tactic, in my opinion. So, okay, let's keep going.
None of these are outcomes we want. On the other hand, we know that a less processed, low-fat, plant-based diet is powerful for weight loss, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, brain health, and even athletic performance.
Yeah, I mean, she's not wrong. I mean, those are all, a well-formulated plant-based diet can help in all of those, okay? If you want to look at type 2 diabetes, though, and you want to look at weight loss, there's a lot of studies showing that ketogenic diets are superior in terms of weight loss if they're done correctly. That's debatable, but there are many studies that do show that. Type 2 diabetes, ketogenic diets and low-carb diets in general consistently show larger improvements in hemoglobin A1C, which is one of the main measures that we use to monitor diabetes. So she's not really telling you the whole truth there. But again, if you want to follow a plant-based diet, and especially if it's a hypocaloric diet, it's well-balanced, and it's essentially free of processed foods, I mean, you can get really good results in all of these areas, including athletic performance. So yeah, she's not wrong on that. So let's finish up here.
So, despite the hype surrounding keto diets, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes have always been and will continue to be optimal foods for health.
Yeah, I agree. You should totally eat that stuff. But what's also true is if you want to go on a ketogenic diet, especially if you have excess weight to lose, especially if hunger is a main issue for you while you're in a low calorie state, I think you can try a ketogenic diet, and you're not going to keel over from heart disease. You are not going to suddenly develop colon cancer. You're not going to get any of the bad things that she's talking about here if it's done properly, just like any diet. So just to finish things up, guys, I don't want to get too long-winded on this. What do I do for my keto diet? As you can probably guess, I don't drink bacon grease. Whenever I do a ketogenic diet, it's always I do it for weight loss, always. So it's a hypocaloric diet. So I start, because I'm in a hypocaloric diet, I want to hold on to as much muscle tissue as possible, okay? So I keep my protein level relatively high. Studies show at least 2.2 grams per kilo. So that's what I do. Now, when I get older, in my 60s and 70s, I will probably up that protein. I have another video where I talk about protein needs in elderly people, especially. Because again, holding on to muscle tissue when you diet is probably the most important thing you can do. The fat loss is great, but you absolutely, for your long-term health and for your metabolic health, you need to hold on to muscle tissue. So I keep my protein high. I keep my carbohydrate intake under about 30 grams. My ketone levels rapidly drop off if I go too high or much higher than that. For me, it's all from vegetables. I love cauliflower, broccoli, asparagus, that kind of stuff. So I eat a shit ton of that stuff. I like spinach. I eat a lot of spinach. I'll put spinach in my protein shakes. I'll cook spinach. It's great. I don't eat a lot of fruit. Occasionally I might throw like a couple raspberries or like a little handful of blueberries in the shake just for for a little added flavor. But even when I'm not on a ketogenic diet, I'm just not a big fruit guy, so I just don't eat a lot of fruit. Now the fat intake, maybe this is a bit different than what other ketogenic diets you might see out there. I do try to limit my saturated fat intake. So of all my total calories from fat, I mean, I try to do no more than 1/3 of those total fat calories from saturated fat. Usually it's quite a bit less than that. And the rest is poly and monounsaturated fat. So I love flaxseed oil. I know it's not for everybody. I think it tastes great. I load up my shakes with that. I'll sometimes switch it out with hemp seeds and hemp seed oil, which I also really like. I mentioned I use a lot of olive oil. I just really like olive oil. I eat a lot of oily fish, which I love salmon. I love sashimi. So I consume quite a bit of that. And you know what? I have an occasional rare steak, maybe once or twice a week because I really like it. And, I don't cook it at, 9 million degrees to ash. I keep it nice and juicy, just a little bit bloody, and I don't overheat it. And that works really well for me. I feel fantastic on those diets. Does my cardio endurance take a little bit of a hit? Yeah, sometimes. Like in jiu-jitsu, I might get a little bit more gassed when I'm in deep ketosis, but I can mitigate that by staying well hydrated, and just basically like controlling how aggro I get when I roll. So so for there's a drop off in my athletic performance, but I don't care. I'm doing the diet to achieve a specific goal, and as well as I do on these diets, I'm a disciplined guy. I can't stay on this forever. So I'll do this for 8 to 16 weeks. I think the most I ever did was 24 weeks. And again, I did fine. I got completely shredded. I'm about to do this again for my 50th birthday. But, I do like grains and pastas and fruit and occasionally and stuff like that. And I like a little bit of variety. So this is not a sustainable diet plan for me. But, if you have a lot of weight to lose and you want to give this type of diet a try, don't be scared off by people like this individual here who are just perpetuating myths. They're trying to scare you. And, quite frankly, they have an underlying political agenda that they're not telling you about. So, and a lot of people, unfortunately, in the fitness, nutrition, and in medicine have that. So it's just something that you got to be aware of. So, okay, guys, that's all I got today. I've been long-winded enough. If you have experience with these kind of diets, ketogenic, vegan diets, plant-based, whatever, let me know. Let me know pros and cons, problems that you've had. I'm always interested in hearing from you guys. So I'll catch you next time. All Man Medicine video and audio has been created and shared online for informational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute the practice of medicine or professional healthcare services of any kind, including the giving of medical advice. I am not your doctor. No doctor-patient relationship has been established. This content is not meant to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied upon solely for that purpose either. The only purpose of this content is to present peer-reviewed, research-backed health information for your consideration. As always, rely on the advice and guidance of your personal physician before undertaking any activity presented here, and if in doubt or not comfortable with said activity, practice discretion. Your health is your responsibility and not ours. Finally, I take conflicts of interest seriously. I accept no compensation whatsoever from any private corporations, including pharmaceutical or supplement companies. You can trust that if I recommend a medication, product, or service, it's because I genuinely believe in it and not because I'm being paid to endorse it.